today we are reviewing a submitted monologue that explores alleged organizational power dynamics and speculative theories surrounding the assassination of Charlie Kirk.
It is definitely a heavy piece of material to dive into.
Yeah, for sure. And jumping right into the feedback, a compelling narrative requires a deliberate progression of ideas rather than a stream of consciousness delivery.
Absolutely.
Because looking at how it's currently structured, it's a bit of a discussion prompt for us, right? The author moves from Tyler Robinson's Discord servers, then makes this sudden shout out to Dan Bongino, and then literally pauses the recording to wipe their nose.
Right, yeah.
And then jumps right back to Tyler Robinson before suddenly detailing a 17-day marriage timeline for George Farmer.
It's a lot. It is a lot. And the weakness here is that these disparate elements and those live reaction interruptions, they just completely distract from the core thesis.
Yeah, it totally derails it.
Exactly. Because when you're writing a piece like this, managing the audience's cognitive load is, like, paramount. Readers and listeners only have a finite mental budget, you know?
Right. They can only hold so much in their head at once.
Exactly. Every time you introduce a new proper noun or a new date or a new location, you're basically asking them to hold that data in their working memory. And human working memory can generally only hold about 4 to 7 chunks of information at any given time.
Wow, only 4 to 7?
Yeah, it's pretty limited. So asking an audience to temporarily store like IP addresses and Discord server logs in their minds only to abruptly interrupt that really fragile mental process with a personal address to a former federal agent.
The Dan Bongino shout-out, yeah.
Right. It just overloads the system. It dilutes the impact of the timeline the author is attempting to build because the investigative momentum is just constantly stopping and starting. You are effectively forcing the audience to repeatedly drop the core thread.
So a key theme running through this material seems to be building a web of connections, right?
Yes, exactly.
But right now, it feels like, it's like a detective's corkboard where the strings are just crossing randomly.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Right? Because if the goal is to highlight George Farmer's rapid ascent to the Turning Point UK chairmanship, why introduce Bongino and Kash Patel right before it?
It makes no sense structurally.
It acts like a power surge that trips the breaker. It just shatters the focus.
Building on that corkboard analogy, what if we looked at it from the perspective of an audience who is, highly skeptical but willing to listen?
Okay, yeah.
When they see those crossed wires, they don't see a sophisticated multi-tiered conspiracy. They just see disorganized panic.
Right.
So the suggestion here, the way to fix this, is to restructure the text into clear thematic blocks. You have to remove those visceral distractions and isolated shout-outs to maintain an investigative momentum.
Give me some concrete examples of how they can actually do that.
Sure. So first, you need to create a chronological roadmap. Start explicitly with the known event.
Which would be the Discord servers.
Exactly. The Tyler Robinson Discord server. That needs to be its own uninterrupted block of text. Establish that base fact completely before introducing any secondary variable.
Okay, so isolate that first.
Yes. And then, the next step involves isolating the George Farmer timeline. Take that 17-day marriage timeline and the 2-month jump to the Turning Point UK appointment and put all of that into a dedicated section specifically about organizational power.
So keeping it in its own distinct lane, basically.
Right, so the audience can fully digest it before you merge the concepts later. And, crucially, remove the live, unedited elements entirely. That is a structural necessity.
Oh, definite. Like that line, y'all gotta excuse me for a second. I gotta go find something to wipe my nose with.
Yeah, that has to go. Removing those specific elements is non-negotiable. It just completely derails the seriousness of the investigation.
It breaks the fourth wall, right?
It really does. It reminds the listener that they are just listening to a raw, unpolished stream of thought rather than a carefully audited report.
Yeah, and that leads perfectly into our next point. Once the structure is organized into a clean timeline, the actual language used has to match the gravity of the accusations.
Exactly.
Because persuasive arguments build authority through definitive statements rather than retreating into speculative disclaimers.
That is so true.
Let's look closely at the section discussing the motives. The material makes a really strong case for urgency by highlighting phrases like, "we're at war," and claiming irrefutable evidence.
Right. Really strong language there.
But then, simultaneously, it relies heavily on phrases like "just asking questions," or perhaps "maybe" and "allegedly."
Yeah, the weakness there is the severe tonal whiplash. That clash between claiming absolute, urgent certainty and then employing passive, evasive phrasing. It really undermines the author's credibility.
It signals a lack of confidence, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It tells the audience that you don't actually trust your own evidence.
Well, I can see what they're going for here, though. Let's see how we can strengthen this. Because I have to ask, is there a risk that focusing solely on removing words like perhaps might expose the claims as legally risky?
Ah, the legal question.
Yeah, like the author might be using just asking questions as a necessary shield against defamation, right? How do they maintain analytical safety without sounding uncommitted?
That is a classic trap in investigative writing. Authors frequently operate under the assumption that feigning ignorance or framing accusations as hypotheticals is the only reliable shield.
Right. They think saying just asking questions gives them legal immunity.
Exact. But in reality, documented fact is your absolute best defense. My suggestion is to shift from speculative questioning to an objective presentation of anomalies.
Let the unusual facts do the heavy lifting.
Precisely. Let the facts speak for themselves instead of leading the audience with hypothetical rhetorical questions.
Give me a concrete example of what that looks like in the text.
Okay, so instead of writing, is it possible that George Farmer, who somehow in the span of maybe 2 months became chairman, you reframe it as a definitive observation?
How would you phrase it?
You'd write, the timeline shows a 17-day period from meeting to engagement, followed 2 months later by an appointment to chairman of Turning Point UK. This rapid succession warrants close scrutiny.
Oh, wow. Yeah, the psychological difference there is massive.
It really is. The first version sounds like a rumor, but the second version sounds like a formal subpoena.
It sounds so much more professional.
Another concrete example would be to remove the repetitive use of "we're just asking questions" entirely. Replace those with statements of necessity.
Like what?
Like stating, these intersecting timelines demand a formal federal review. It projects conviction. It changes your posture from someone asking for permission to investigate to an active auditor demanding accountability.
That makes total sense. Now, that brings us to the final hurdle, because now that the piece has a logical structure and an authoritative tone, the explicit connections between these confidently stated facts actually have to hold up to scrutiny.
The logical bridges, yes.
Exactly. Connecting disparate events requires explicit logical bridges, rather than relying on proximity to imply causation.
This is where a lot of these deep dive theories fall apart.
Right. Let me point out the specific leaps made in this text. It moves from George Farmer's marriage and his board power to this broad idea that leftists wanted Charlie Kirk's life.
Huge leap.
Then it dismisses Israel's PR efforts out of nowhere and suddenly brings up Carmelo Anthony stabbing someone as proof that, quote, sometimes the story is just the story.
Yeah, and the weakness here is that the material assumes the reader will just automatically fill in the blanks between all those scattered data points.
It places them near each other, but never explains how they actually interact.
Exactly. Putting two sentences next to each other does not forge a logical link. It relies entirely on apophenia.
Apophenia?
Yeah, it's the psychological tendency for the human brain to perceive meaningful connections between entirely unrelated things.
Oh, interesting. Like seeing patterns where there aren't any?
Right. Evolutionarily, it was safer to see a rustling bush, assume it was a predator, and run away, even if it was just the wind.
Better safe than sorry.
Exact. False positives keep you alive in the wild. But in formal investigative writing, false positives destroy your credibility.
That makes a lot of sense. But let me push back just a little here. Could the evidence support a different conclusion? Like by bringing in Israel's PR and the verified letter to Netanyahu, isn't the author trying to actively dismiss alternative theories?
You mean like throwing out red herrings just to burn them down?
Yeah, like it might be a deliberate strategy to narrow the suspect pool.
It is a standard investigative technique, sure, but introducing a red herring without an explicit logical bridge showing why it's a red herring, it usually backfires.
Because it just confuses the reader.
Right, and it inadvertently validates the alternative theory just by giving it airtime. So, the suggestion here is to build explicit, step-by-step logical bridges.
And if a detail doesn't directly connect to the power grab,
then it needs to be cut to preserve the focus of the argument, period.
let's give some concrete examples of those bridges. So first, you have to map out the exact hypothetical mechanism, right?
Yes, you state if George Farmer was in the Discord servers and if Tyler Robinson was radicalized there, what is the exact chain of influence?
Detail exactly how one leads to the other.
Exactly. You can't just put them in the same paragraph and hope the reader gets it. You have to explicitly link them.
And what about the tangents?
Oh, eliminate the Carmelo Anthony comparison completely.
Yeah, introducing an unrelated sports crime really confuses the complex political conspiracy being alleged.
It actively works against the core premise. And the same goes for the tangent about the Book of Revelation and the accuser of the brethren.
Right, near the end of the piece. It adds personal flair, but it fails to connect logically to the federal investigation of IPs and Discord servers.
You just can't jump from digital forensics to theological warfare in a single breath. It undermines the empirical foundation you just spent pages trying to construct.
It introduces an incompatible variable. Okay, so to briefly recap the main points of our critique today. First, structural real organization, building a thematic roadmap instead of a stream of consciousness delivery.
Which manages the cognitive load.
Right. Second, tonal adjustment, using definitive analytical statements instead of speculative disclaimers.
Projecting authority. Yes.
And third, logical focus, building explicit bridges instead of relying on proximity.
Exactly. And just to summarize the actionable suggestions for the listener right now, remove the nose wiping and the Bugino asides entirely.
Get those out of there.
Replace just asking questions with factual timeline statements. Explicitly link the Discord servers to the board power dynamics, and cut the Carmelo Anthony analogy and the Book of Revelation.
Keep it tight and focused. We invite you to implement these revisions and submit your updated work back in for a future critique. Thank you so much for sending this in. It was a really fascinating read.
It really was. Good luck with the edits.